Welcome to Tourism Supply 2. We're going to talk a little bit about attractions and activities. Tourism supply involves attractions and activities. These can include natural resources as well as man-made resources. Natural resources include things like water, topography, vegetation, wildlife and climate, while man-made resources include things like theme parks, museums and galleries, heritage sites, craft centres, safari parks, entertainment complexes, health spas and casinos. And the good news for those of us involved in the hospitality, tourism and recreation fields is there are tourism-related jobs involved in managing each of these attractions and activities, both natural and man-made. Natural resources include things like water. And here's a few different images involving water as a natural resource serving as a tourist attraction. There's whitewater rafting in the Navua River in the M.I.C.E highlands of Fiji. Surfing tourism is a burgeoning international tourism industry that takes place in more than 160 countries. And of course, just general sun, sand and sea beach tourism is also enduringly and enormously popular throughout the world. Topography is also another natural resource that is a great tourist attraction. This is in Joshua Tree National Park, halfway up Ryan's Mountain. Really interesting topography that draws people to that particular national park all the time. Vegetation can be another tourist attraction that's a natural resource. Again, there's an image here from Joshua Tree National Park. The Joshua trees themselves, very beautiful and serve as a tourist attraction, particularly where there are forests of those things. The image on the right is an image of the world's largest flower, which is also known as a corpse flower. The corpse flower stinks like rotting flesh. It does this to attract flies to help out in the pollination process. So this person with their face inside of this flower is not smelling flowers, they're actually smelling the same chemical that a rotting body produces. You've probably driven past roadkill at some point during your life and snorted out your nose to try and get the foul smell out of there. That's what this flower is producing for its pollination purposes. So hats off to that person for being extremely brave or silly and getting a close-up whiff of the corpse flower. It only flowers once a year, and it's often a major attraction at botanical gardens. This particular one is in the Botanical Garden in Australia, and it's something that they advertise when it's in bloom and does draw visitors to the botanical gardens in Australia as a result. These guys are also very popular tourist attractions. We've got koalas on the left-hand side there. I mean, they're on the billboards for the San Diego Zoo at the moment, so clearly there's a draw there where, regardless of where the koalas are. The guy on the right there is a Komodo dragon, and Komodo dragons come from the southeastern Indonesian island of Komodo, hence the name. Now, I've been to Komodo, travelling through there on a surfing trip. I just by coincidence had to change ferries in Komodo, and it's really a dusty little island sticking out of the Indian Ocean without much to recommend itself to tourists other than the Komodo dragon. The whole area is a national park. And there were scores of tourists going to Komodo specifically to see the Komodo dragon, and a show where at the time they would string a goat up by its back foot, slit its neck and watch the Komodo dragons come out and feed on this dead goat. A little bit macabre, but certainly a tourist attraction that was the only thing that was bringing foreign exchange into that particular island, and it was economically supporting the management of that national park. Climate is another natural resource that perhaps gets overlooked, but is an incredibly powerful tourist attraction. People from very cold areas will travel to very warm areas. People from warm areas will travel to places that are a little cooler if that's what they're looking for. And many seaside resorts around the world, particularly in southern Europe, in the tropics within 6 hours flight of the United States, Canada, are many places that are extremely populated tourist destinations as a result of the climate that they have. San Diego is another beneficiary of tourism because of its climate, particularly from people within the United States who live in really, really cold places. Activities are also an element of tourist supply, the supply of tourism. There are activities and tours, festivals, M.I.C.E, and we're not referring to rodents here. M.I.C.E is an acronym that stands for Meetings, Incentives, Conferences and Events, and sports-related tourism. Tours are obviously very popular and take place in all kinds of different formats and forms. One of the more recent developments is the idea of a Segway tour. Now these are becoming increasingly popular. They seem to be a good addition to tourism products within a city, in that people can visit a lot of attractions during a day without congesting roadways with traffic. And in addition to that, the tourists are not exhausted at the end of their day of touring and still have the energy to go out for dinner and perhaps spend a little more money in the local economy. Of course, there's lots of work in tour guiding, in putting tours together, in managing tours, in handling the logistics, marketing and sales around tours. Festivals are another element of tourism supply. Here we're looking at Oktoberfest, really popular tourist attraction, drawing people to Germany and pretty much anywhere that has some kind of Oktoberfest kind of celebration, and music festivals, which have been enduringly popular throughout the ages. Festivals can be used by tourist destinations to address seasonality in their own tourism industry. So, for example, where I used to live for a long time in Sydney was a beachside suburb called Manly. Now, during the summertime, Manly was completely full of people, overrun with local and international tourists. There's 4 or 5 cafes on every block, a pub on every corner, restaurants in between and hotels in between those, and everything's full during the summertime. Everyone's on the beach or close by to the beach. In the wintertime, there's an exodus of tourists, and there's all this open inventory of unused restaurant seats and unfilled hotel beds. So in response to that, Manly has developed several festivals that they'll put on during these winter months. One is an international jazz festival that runs for 4 days during the winter, and over that 4-day period, Manly is more busy than the busiest day during the summertime. All the hotels are full, all the pubs are full, the restaurants are full, the cafes are full, the streets are full, the souvenir shops are doing a ripping trade. It really is an economic stimulus for the area, albeit kind of short. They also developed a wine and food festival. Same kind of concept. It's not quite as popular as the jazz festival, but it still brings in probably a couple of 100,000 people over the course of a weekend through Manly. And again, a little less popular. There's not a little less international visitation for that particular festival, but it also does a good job of helping those businesses that rely on tourism combat the extreme seasonality of tourism to Manly. Many, many other cities do very similar things to bring in business into their communities in times when the tourism infrastructure is not being utilised as much as it might be. There are also cultural festivals. This is the Mount Hagen Festival in Papua New Guinea, which is a popular, but not outrageously popular, cultural festival. A lot of people go there specifically for photography purposes. This is where all of the different tribes in Papua New Guinea, well, many of them, there are more than 836 distinct tribal groups with their own separate languages in Papua New Guinea. They don't all come, but many of them do. And they get a chance to dress up in their traditional attire and perform their traditional songs and celebrate their culture. And it is genuinely jaw-droppingly amazing. Just a few images from my travels up in Mount Hagen. M.I.C.E is an acronym we mentioned before, and these are activities that are involved in tourism supply. M refers to meetings. Meeting planning is an incredibly popular profession. A lot of people starting to be meeting and events planners right here at San Diego State. Incentives is one you may not have heard of outside of the tourism industry. Incentive travel is travel that's usually put on by corporations to reward their top performers. So, for example, Toyota of San Diego might be giving incentive travel to their best performing salespeople each year. I have this particular image here because a friend of mine worked in an independent surf store in Australia, and they were the recipient of incentive travel from Rip Curl. Ultimately, one year they sold more Rip Curl product than pretty much any other independent surf shop in Australia, and the top 4 stores got to take 2 people to the Mentawai Islands in Indonesia and on a liveaboard boat like this for 2 weeks. So they were being incentivized with this travel, and it's a very specialized niche to put together incentive travel because it kind of has to be really kick-ass within the niche that it's operating to. So if you're incentivizing staff, you want to give them something pretty nice. It's kind of like a big prize that a lot of people are going to be working towards. The idea is to try and improve performance across a wide range of workers by dangling this very juicy carrot in front of them. Only a few people will get to sample it, but its juiciness is enough to motivate thousands of people. At least that's the idea. So it can be really fun to work for an incentive travel group and putting together really luxurious, interesting and creative trips. Conferences and conventions makes up the C of M.I.C.E. We have a picture here from Comic-Con in San Diego, which is a phenomenally huge economic injection into the local area. And San Diego has been fighting for years to keep Comic-Con in San Diego, to the point where expansions to San Diego's convention center are being driven in no small part by an attempt by the city to keep Comic-Con here rather than lose it to somewhere like Anaheim or Las Vegas. The E in M.I.C.E stands for events. Sporting events, the ones that we mentioned a little earlier, can be absolutely huge. What you're looking at here is the 2000 Olympics in Sydney. And there's a lot of controversy, and there usually is, around cities hosting the Olympics as to whether it's going to be worth the money to put them on, because they are outrageously expensive and require an incredible amount of logistics and coordination to pull them off effectively. And there was a lot of argument around whether it was worth Sydney's time and money to actually stage the Olympics. A lot of places will stage the Olympics to advertise themselves as a tourist destination, because you would know that in the television coverage of the Olympics, in between events, there are little vignettes of places in and around that city and stories about local culture. And a lot of places will invest in hosting an Olympics in order to get the word out about their country. And Sydney siders were like, well, everybody knows Sydney already. We don't suffer from a lack of brand recognition, so why would we do this? Ultimately, I think it was a good thing. I was in Sydney when this went on. It was, I think, surprisingly a good thing for the culture of the city. It was a genuinely warm and wonderful time when people were speaking to strangers and being nice to each other in ways that they usually aren't in Sydney. I think it was really good for the city. Beijing hosted the Olympics recently, and I think did it for reasons perhaps of announcing to the world that China has become a country capable of hosting the Olympics and doing a good job with that, which they did, and showcased the country, how modern it was, how incredible designs of buildings, and essentially just being capable of pulling off a mega event like that. Other mega sporting events include the World Cup of Soccer. Rugby World Cup is becoming increasingly large. Formula One Grand Prix around the world, cities will battle each other for the rights to host those. So, and they all bring quite a lot of money. The Olympics is a little bit more of a grey area because it is such a massive event as to whether the cities actually benefit from that in terms of dollars and cents. The more intangible returns on investment, I think, are a little more clear. Also included in tourism supply is accommodation, transport, institutional support, other tourist facilities, and travel and tourism intermediaries. And there are tourism-related jobs in each of these sectors as well. So again, the possibilities for employment in the tourism industry are really varied and quite massive. Accommodation is fundamental to tourism, but there is major capital investment required. And there tend to be quantum increases in the supply of accommodation, in that it doesn't go up by a room or two. It's more like it'll go up by 400 rooms or 500 rooms as large resorts and hotels are built. However, it is really important that supply and demand meet in the middle with accommodation. Supply needs to be linked with visitation levels and projected growth. If you have too much supply, you'll lose money. And the image we have here is of a $250 million Marriott overwater bungalow development in Fiji. Now, at the time that this project was planned, tourism growth in Fiji was surging ahead. It was probably conceived of around 2002, and work started around 2005. Then in 2006, a military coup overthrew the democratically elected government and demand precipitously dropped. And as a result of that, this project never got off the ground. If you have too little supply, it'll stifle growth. So if there's not enough demand, then you're going to stifle growth. You end up with a situation that happened also in Fiji in 2005, and why this property looked like a good investment in the first place. There just wasn't enough supply for the demand for tourism in Fiji in 2005. And as a result of that, you had people being overbooked, showing up to hotels that they'd booked months in advance and finding that there were no rooms. And they couldn't be shifted over to equally nice hotels because they were all booked out as well. And so you had people who'd booked at 5-star resorts being shunted to 3-star resorts, being very, very disgruntled, bad word of mouth, bad experiences, not what you want from tourism. So it's really important to link accommodation growth with demand. Transport in tourism is also absolutely fundamental. It's the link between the tourist generating region and the destination region. In other words, the link between the tourist and the destination. If this is severed for some reason, the entire tourism system collapses. For example, if there's a pilot strike or a mechanical breakdown or infrastructure damage from weather, or a volcano erupting in Iceland or northern Sumatra that grounds aircraft, tourism just stops. Institutional support is something that perhaps we don't often think about, but this is required to make sure that there are quality employees available to work in the tourism industry itself and in the organisations that plan for tourism. So these institutions tend to be public and private sector bodies managing the supply of tourism services. For example, national tourism organisations, and which are usually arms of government, help to plan tourism supply, and you need quality people there who can analyse markets and make the right calls on accommodation supply, on increasing transport infrastructure and investing in different places. Now, the types of institutions that support this are ones like San Diego State University, which has a hospitality and tourism management program, and is training people to be professionals in the tourism industry and related industries like recreation, which go hand in hand with tourism and hospitality. Other tourist facilities also need to be in place to provide the supply that allows tourism to take place. Now, these can be things that we might not traditionally think of as well. And these may include healthcare, power, water, sewerage, roads, public sector suppliers, and utilities. Airports are also included in these other tourist facilities. These are now largely privately owned and very profitable enterprises because they control the gateways into countries and cities, and for the most part they're monopolies. And you can tell just how profitable they are because the price of a bottle of water doubles the moment you walk into an airport. The price of a beer doubles the moment you walk into an airport. And that's a reflection of how much rent airports are charging businesses to operate in there because there's really nowhere else for people to go. In some areas there is competition emerging. For example, in London, you can either fly into Heathrow Airport, which is right in the middle of London, or you can fly into Gatwick Airport, which is going to take you an hour and a half to a couple of hours to get from the heart of London out to there. But it's a cheaper option for the airlines, which allows them to offer cheaper rates flying from different parts of the world and landing in Gatwick. So if you have the time, or you live closer to Gatwick, or you don't mind spending an hour on a bus to save a few $100s, then that's another option as well. So these are some of the elements that go into making up tourism supply.